Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for joining us today for the Books Are the Basis Week Festival. In this video, we have the opportunity to hear from His Holiness Swam Bhagavan Keshava Swami and His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu on the Bhagavad-gita as it is. I hope that this podcast will inspire you to read Srila Prabhupada's books every day. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and access hundreds of such inspirational videos. And if you know a friend who's keen on this topic of reading Srila Prabhupada's books regularly, invite them too. So now, on to the video. All glories to Bhagavad-gita as it is.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. My blessings to you.
Congratulations on your sannyas. Nice to see you now.
Thank you so much.
All the entire devotee community, especially our generation, is thrilled to see you take this step forward. And my best wishes and prayers to you for this.
Thank you so much.
Outreach more and more. I'm delighted to be
here. It's been an eventful few months, and I've been traveling a little bit more and exploring the new opportunities that the ashram has to offer me, and praying that I can become a better instrument in Srila Prabhupada's movement. So thank you. And welcome to all our viewers today. We are here today having a discussion as part of the glorification of Srila Prabhupada's books. And today we're specifically speaking about the Bhagavad-gita and the importance of the Bhagavad-gita in our life, what the Bhagavad-gita is really giving us as sadhakas on the spiritual journey. And we're also looking at how to delve deeper into the Gita to draw fresh inspiration, deeper insights, and more and more wisdom, which we can use to enrich our Gita as one of our key scriptures through which we can reach the world with very powerful and relevant wisdom. And so, of course, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu needs no introduction. He's a renunciate for many years, a preacher. In recent years, has been traveling more and more across the world. He's the author of many, many books. He has his online podcast and his website, The Spiritual Scientist. And today, specifically, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu is one of the ideal personalities to have this conversation with, because he's written, I think, probably close to 2,000 articles on the Bhagavad-gita. Would that be correct, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu?
Well, I've been writing for 11 years now, so it's about 4,000.
Oh, 4,000. I was half. Okay, so 4,000 articles on the Bhagavad-gita, his Gita Daily. It's usually about a 300 to 400 word article, which gives a very practical but deep wisdom insight into one of the verses. And he's recently taken some of that material and produced 2 new books, which he'll be sharing a little bit with us later on, based on Srila Prabhupada's Gita and how to derive more from it. So we'll be discussing a little bit about this today. Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, let me ask you, devotees read Shastra and then they go to deeper and deeper levels. Oftentimes we find that the Bhagavad-gita is taken by devotees as kind of an introductory book to get familiar with the basics of Krishna consciousness. And then later on, when they go to reading the Bhagavatam or perhaps the CC and other books, that's where they tend to spend more time, like going deeper into the commentaries and studying to different levels. But it's interesting that yourself, for 2 to 3 decades, you've been studying the Gita, and the Gita remains a big focus for you, a big focus of contemplation, reflection, and study. That's quite unique. Can you tell us something about why the Gita remains a book that is capturing your imagination clearly?
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, frankly, the Bhagavad-gita was the book which captivated me. I could say my relationship with the Bhagavad-gita has had 4 different stages. I like to visualize the verses of the Gita as my close friends. Maybe it's a little presumptuous and sacrilegious. But just as if we have some difficulties, we turn to our friends for insights. So like that. So in my childhood, I recited the Gita, I memorized the Gita. I was born in a pious Indian family. So it is a part of a shloka recitation competitions. And that was, okay, this is something nice, something like nice, sweet and nice to recite. I didn't think of it as a source of meaning or wisdom or life guidance at that time. Then second stage was when I was introduced to Srila Prabhupada's Gita. Actually, I had read a few Gitas. I started a little bit of a philosophical search in my life when I was around 15, when my mother passed away of cancer. So I had read a few Gitas before I read Prabhupada's Gita. And when I read Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gita as it is, what struck me with 2 things: the clarity and the consistency, which was amazing. That the Bhagavad-gita can be a very confusing and complex book. So, but I found Prabhupada's explanation so clear and so consistent. And it became very clear to me that this is what I would like to study, this is what I'd like to share. I found that the Gita helped me, you could say, find my calling in my life. I never really thought that I became a brahmachari in one sense. It was, I never thought that, okay, I'm choosing to become a brahmachari. I thought that I'm studying the Gita. I want to study the Gita further. I want to share it. And the best place to do it is the brahmachari ashram. So in that sense, becoming a brahmachari was secondary. Even joining ISKCON was secondary. It was more studying the Gita. And I would say it's not only the Gita, but the wisdom surrounding the Gita, because I see the Gita like a center point and like a nucleus, and around which you can have many, many areas where we could explore. So that was, for me, Srila Prabhupada's Gita became like the main guiding light for my life. That was the second stage. Then the third stage was where I started reading previous Acharya's commentaries on the Gita. And I started realizing, hey, there are similarities, but there are substantial differences also. Not in terms of conclusions, but in terms of analysis. And then that's when I read Prabhupada's well-known quote that, study scripture scrutinizingly from multiple perspectives. So, when I studied previous Acharya's commentaries, I started finding that each verse could have so many layers and levels of meaning. Now, at present, so then that was the third stage where I was exploring the Gita, you could say, from multiple perspectives. And I won't say these stages are entirely discrete, because I keep studying Prabhupada's Gita, I keep reading previous Acharya's commentaries also. So, after the third stage came the fourth stage, where I became convinced that the Gita will be the basis of what I want to share in the world. So I do, of course, speak on the Bhagavatam, on the CC, but the Gita is the center of my both in-reach and outreach. I hope to come closer to Krishna through the Gita and to help others come closer. And within that, so that particular theme of statement of Prabhupada, so 2 statements of Srila Prabhupada. One is that study scripture scrutinizingly from multiple perspectives, and every day write your realization. So I would say those 2 statements have been the driving force for me in my study, my analysis, my presentation, and my writing, of course. So
Yeah.
I hope to be continue on in this fourth stage, lifelong, Krishna willing.
Yeah, I mean, to write 4,000 articles, it means you're constantly finding newer and newer insights. And this is something I want to ask you. It's kind of fascinating to me. Like, in analyzing and drawing lessons from the Gita, how creative can we get? How do we know when we're kind of coming up with something based on our kind of creative imagination? How do we know? Like, okay, let me give you an example. I was reading your new book, and in the very first chapter, I think you talk about Dhritarashtra, and you ask the question, which is a very interesting question, as to why does the Bhagavad-gita begin with Dhritarashtra Uvacha? And the lesson that you draw from there, if I understood it correctly, and I remember correctly, is you explain that it's not just a contextual thing that, okay, Dhritarashtra is in the palace and he's hearing from Sanjay, and therefore the Gita begins like that. But we could also take it a little deeper and see that Dhritarashtra, his personality is outlined at the beginning, the very first verse of the Gita, so that the reader can understand what kind of mentality not to have. Because if you have this kind of mentality, you'll never really grasp the message of the Gita. And so it's almost like the Gita begins with a warning of not to be like this person, because that will block you from absorbing the message. Did I understand that point? Did I convey it correctly?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you for bringing that example.
Yes.
So
I was just wondering, when it comes to things like this, for example, an insight like that, did you get that from the commentaries? Do you get that? How did you, what was that process by which you came up with that insight?
Thank you. So, okay, so currently my favorite metaphor for understanding the Gita or approaching the Gita is it's a jigsaw puzzle. And it's an extraordinary jigsaw puzzle, because a normal jigsaw puzzle, it's challenging because you have to get each piece in the right place, and then it all fits together to give an attractive picture. But the Gita is such a jigsaw puzzle that you can fit the pieces in different ways, and each of those times you get an attractive picture. Now, of course, the attractive picture, so Chakravarti Pad has fit the Gita's pieces. By pieces, I mean verses, concepts, chapters. It put them together, and he has got a beautiful picture emerging from the Gita. Baldev Vidyabhushan, who is considered his disciple, he has put the Gita together in a very different way. In fact, although some verses they explain similarly, their overall frame of analysis is very different. And yet, the picture that ultimately comes is there are two things which are consistent. So that is, and this is where I find Srila Prabhupada's clarity and consistency so empowering, that ultimately the Gita is about sadhan and sadhya. That's one of the last articles in that book which you mentioned, that what is the purpose of the Gita is to tell Arjuna, both contextually and universally, for all of us, that, okay, what is the purpose to achieve in life? What is the sadhya? And what is the means to achieve that purpose? What is the sadhana? So Srila Prabhupada, throughout his Gita commentary, his Bhagavad-gita as it is very consistent. Right in the introduction, Srila Prabhupada says, our purpose in writing this Gita and this commentary on the Gita is the same as the purpose of Krishna in descending to this world thousands of years ago. And what is that? To establish these two truths. What is the sadhan? What is the sadhya? The sadhya is Bhagavan, aham sarvasya prabho. As Arjuna himself says that, sarvam etadritam manya, I accept what you say as true. And then what is the sadhya? Sorry, what is sadhan? That is bhakti. Karishye vachanam tava. I will do your will. So, if these 2 points we keep in mind, so in the Relishing Bhagavad-gita book, what I did is, Srila Prabhupada consistently emphasizes that bhakti is the conclusion. That actually Krishna's love is manifesting, and he emphasizes bhakti very, very clearly. So I was thinking that how best to understand this and to convey this. And Srila Prabhupada talks about the difference between, say, philosophical speculation and mental speculation. And it could be understood in different ways. The way I put it, I mean, the way Prabhupada explains it, but I put it concisely is that philosophical speculation means seek different ways to arrive at the desired conclusion or at the specified conclusion. So we have scope for our intelligence. In one sense, that's the whole gamut of bhakti also. What we are meant to do with our life is to serve Krishna. We are his parts, we are meant to serve him. But how we serve him, there is abundant room for individuality, individual initiative, individual creativity, individual, even liberty, if we use that word. So similarly, in the study of scripture, we come to the final conclusion. So, and how exactly, what process of reasoning we use, that is something which I feel we have our own God-given abilities. And what I did was, I was always interested in literature. And in the last few years, I have studied quite a few books about the structure of books. So when a book is written, okay, how is the author writing a book? Why is the author starting from this perspective? Why is the author taking this angle? Say, when you study this, as an author, you study the structure. We write books, so we structure our books. But when you study writing, we see the structure of books. And then that itself becomes a fascinating study. Why is Krishna putting so many verses for this, so few verses for this? Why is the Gita starting here? So my understanding is that that particular point, now coming to a specific example of the Dhritarashtra. So it is that if you see, the Gita starts with that frame and it ends also with that frame. Sanjay is speaking with Dhritarashtra. So towards the end of it, the Dhritarashtra's heart is not changed. So in one sense, that is saying that one important point I say is that this is one way to fit the Bhagavad-gita jigsaw puzzle. I'm not saying that is the only way, and there are many different ways to fit it. And adeshyate cha yemam dharmyam samvadamavayo jnana yagyena tena aham ishtasyamiti me matihi. That we worship Krishna with our intelligence when we study the Gita in this way. Now, I take an inspiration from both Chakravarti Pad and Baldev Darshan commentaries, and not just see the points that they make, but try to understand the reasoning by which they make those points. So, and I have talked with various senior devotees who have commented on the Gita. So, for example, Chakravarti Pad may give a particular reason why a particular name is used for Krishna at a particular point. Say, like Prabhupada says, he says, Keshi is like a demon, Keshi Sudana, his nation is Sudana. That doubts are like demons, and Arjuna is requesting Krishna, please kill the demon of doubt in my heart. Now, these meanings they give at particular places. At other places, they may not give the meanings. But if that name has been used, and if we can find out with our God-given intelligence, okay, how does this name make sense? And I feel it enhances the appreciation for the Gita. So, for example, the last word that Krishna uses to refer to Arjuna is Dhananjaya. Kachiteja Sudam Partho Ekagrena Chetasa Kachit Ajnana Sammoha Pranashtaste Dhananjaya. That's 1872. The last word. Dhananjaya is the winner of wealth. So the way I felt inspired to, the way I understood this was that Krishna is asking Arjuna, you are the winner of wealth. You won physical wealth. Have you now won the spiritual wealth of the wisdom of the Gita? That, oh Dhananjaya, have you understood clearly? Has your illusion been dispelled? So have you been enriched, Arjuna, with this wisdom? So the Gita's wisdom is meant to make all of us Dhananjaya in that sense. So now, in that sense, I follow not necessarily the exact, everything that I write in my books may not be specifically said in the previous Acharya's commentaries. But I follow their way of reasoning. And then I use, as Prabhupada said, philosophical speculation to analyze from different perspectives.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, it's interesting that, one way is that we go to the commentaries and then we derive the lessons that the acharyas have brought to our attention. But here what you're saying is that if you see the text, you can use your intelligence. If you come with an insight as to, a deeper lesson that's contained within the text, if it's in line with the acharya's way of thinking, it follows the Siddhanta of Guru Shastra, and if it illuminates the ultimate sadhya and sadhana that the Gita is trying to establish, then we can accept that that insight is bona fide and useful and enriching to our spiritual journey.
Yes. I feel, otherwise, what do we mean by study from different perspectives? Prabhupada said that. So we have our experience, we have our understanding, we have God, Krishna has given the intelligence. And we will see things from a particular perspective. When we say Bodhayanta Parasparam, that's where I see from my perspective, you see from your perspective. So the boundary would be that I would never contradict anything that a previous Acharya has said. I can give a different perspective. So for example, 110, the word aparyaptam, Chakravarti Pad and Baldev Devashin give different meanings of that. So aparyaptam, Chakravarti Pad says that actually he means it's insufficient. And Baldev Devashin says it means immeasurable. Duryodhana is comparing the two armies. So there could be sometimes different perspectives, but that does not necessarily mean that one is right and the other is wrong. It is just like the classic example is, another point for this is that the 64 meanings of the Atmaram verse that Mahaprabhu himself gives. The idea is that there is within our tradition a lot of room, not just room, a lot of precedent for the use of intelligence in understanding scripture. And to the extent we study scripture, it's like scripture is a manifestation of Krishna. And if we understand it's not different from Krishna, then each one of us has our personal relationship with Krishna. So each one of us has a personal relationship with scripture. And as I said, this is a perspective. I find it enriching. Others may find it enriching. And I find it enriching not just in my sense of, oh, I am so clever, I am understanding the Gita. I find it deepens my appreciation of Krishna. It deepens my absorption in Krishna. It deepens my conviction of how Srila Prabhupada has been so brilliant in emphasizing what he has emphasized in his Gita commentary. So, Phalena Parichayate, we can say. Now, this particular frame of analysis, will it necessarily help everyone? Well, no, it is a matter of, I would say, it is a matter of, see, there is realizations. And what is a realization for me may not seem that striking a realization for someone else. And that's perfectly fine. So I find fitting the jigsaw puzzle quite intriguing. And it's quite intellectually fascinating, actually, and fascinating and fulfilling.
Yeah, I was thinking many people would read the same verse as what you read, and they may not see what you see. And of course, you said the Shastra is Krishna, is all individual. But clearly, you have been gifted with an ability to draw many things from scriptures, draw many insights that maybe others, many of us, would not be able to see. And I'm just wondering whether there's anything that you've observed in your own life which makes you more able to discover such things, like what is it that what's the difference between two people who read the Gita and someone who feels like they're reading but they're not able to draw that kind of insight, and another person who seems to just be bombarded with more and more thoughts and realizations? What's the difference?
Well, first of all, let's say that we all are individuals. So, for example, I did a Gopi Gita podcast with Amarendra Prabhu and Madhvanand Prabhu. And I have studied the Gopi Gita. It's one of my favorite sections of the Bhagavatam. But the kind of insights they have. Now, they both studied Acharya's commentaries. I also studied to some extent. But when they were sharing, it is not just the Acharya's commentaries. They sharing the Acharya's commentaries and they're giving their own insights, their own realizations. So my understanding is with respect to the Bhagavatam, many devotees do it. And that's what also makes Bhagavatam relishable with respect to various pastimes. So Prahlad pastime or many other pastimes which we discuss. We do bring in our understanding, our realizations, our perspective when we study the Bhagavatam. And in Chaitanya Charan also some devotees do it. But I feel it is Krishna attracting us to different ways. And maybe when I go in front of the deities, now I don't get Navanava Rasadhamanya in that when I go in front of the deities. But somebody is a pujari, they go in front of the deities, they get that much more. And somebody who is worshipping the deities, so it's Krishna. Krishna, in one sense, gives all of us something within Krishna consciousness that we become attracted to. Having said that, I would say that you also have a lot of insights on the Gita in your in the way you present it, and especially at various places I've traveled, the way you made acronyms initially for various sections of the Gita. That's a brilliant way of making the Gita accessible, memorable, relishable. So I would say, I could ask it, how did you get that idea of making an acronym like that? It's just something that comes, isn't it? You just, you get this acronym, this really works. We try sometimes, okay, this is not fitting, do this, try this. But the way I find acronyms is, you don't really sit down and try to come up with an acronym. It's not that you 6 hours, you're sitting down to come up with the acronym. I don't know if that's how you work. And you think about a subject, but suddenly the acronym comes at a particular time. And it fits. We may do a little bit juggling, about a little bit fixing, tinkering. But overall, this is Krishna, I think. For me, I see, I physically am not able to do much deity worship. So I see words as my way of worshipping Krishna. Just as a pujari would try to put flowers in the most artistic, beautiful way they don't beautify the deities, but they make the beauty of the deities manifest to our vision. So just as there's creativity in that, okay, you could put the flower decoration like this, you could make the effulgence like this, you could make the garland like this. And so just as there is the way of manifesting Krishna's beauty by decorating him with flowers, there could be manifesting Krishna's beauty by offering him words. So I would say my focus is not so much on fresh insights as fresh way of phrasing the insights. So some of course there are fresh insights, but I like to think of the teachings of the Gita and then present them in a way that become easily memorable. So what you have done with acronyms, I try to do with aphorisms. And it's just Krishna using all of us to try to draw more and more people to him, and most importantly, draw us to him, keep us engaged in some way so that we move closer to him.
Yeah, it's interesting how you talk about and we can feel it when you speak, the rasa that you're deriving from your study of the Gita. And I want to ask you this question because the Gita is mainly seen as a book of tattva, a book of philosophical truth, a book which outlines who we are, who is God, and how we connect with God. When we think of rasa, then generally we're thinking of the Bhagavatam, Muhura ho rasika, it's the Rasamalayam. The Bhagavatam is the place where you can experience the rasa of the personality of Godhead. So I want to ask you, people primarily see the Gita as a book of tattva, spiritual truth, spiritual philosophy. And later on, we turn to the Bhagavatam, where we find out about Krishna's name, fame, form, qualities, pastimes, and it really that rasa, that relish. But do you think the Gita is also a book of rasa? You've been I know you've been looking at the Gita, not just at the philosophy, but trying to understand the personalities behind it. And so does the Gita also give you a sense of insight into Krishna's character, his personality? It gives you some relish of rasa in that way. I don't know if you can say something about that.
Yes, that's a beautiful thought. Thank you for raising this point. For me, one of the most illuminating contemporary approaches to the Gita was Garuda Prabhu's the Beloved Lord's Secret Love Song. And there he focuses on how there are Krishna's moods manifested through particular verses. Krishna is sometimes angry, Krishna is sometimes concerned, Krishna is sometimes annoyed. And these are very sweet inferences which are insights into the psychology that is going on. So I found that book particularly illuminating. But then once I was giving 2 series talks at the same time. One was a series on the Mahabharata, and the other was a series on the Bhagavad-gita. And at that time it struck me, I was speaking on Krishna and Arjuna in the Mahabharata. And then I was speaking, especially in the first chapter in the Bhagavad-gita. And in the first chapter, there was Arjuna. So when he was speaking on Arjuna, so what happened was that how Arjuna was thinking, how Arjuna was reflecting, how Arjuna was acting. I found that there were remarkable correlations that could be drawn. I started thinking that how much is the Krishna-Arjuna relationship and how much are the aspects of their relationship playing into the Bhagavad-gita. And that led to an I would say, one of the most delightful phases of study in my spiritual life. So I went to the Mahabharata, all the places that Krishna and Arjuna discussions are going on. Then there are many questions that came up, and I found answers to them. Say, for example, now Arjuna is fighting against the Kauravas in Kurukshetra. Now, when he comes in between the 2 armies and sees the 2 armies, he has fought against that army before. At Virat, he was not overwhelmed at that time. He was not shaken at that time. Why is he shaken now? That is one of the articles in Relishing Bhagavad-gita, that it is that actually, in one sense, if the odds were a matter of concern, then the odds were much worse for him in Virat, because he was all alone. Here he has his brothers, he has an army. But the odds were not worse, but the stakes were worse. There Arjuna had no intention to kill the Kauravas. Just wanted to teach them a lesson. He still hoped that some peaceful solution would come out. But here at Kurukshetra, one side would not go back alive. The stakes were much higher. Now, this particular insight, I found it helped, you could say, understand Arjuna as a person better. And if I had not read the Mahabharata and then not read the Gita, I wouldn't have thought of this. So similarly, Garuda Prabhu focuses on Krishna's personality as it is revealed in the Bhagavad-gita. I focus on how Krishna-Arjuna's relationship comes out. And there are many, I'm hoping to write a book on the Prabhupada says in one purport that Krishna is the ideal teacher in one of the purports in the Bhagavad-gita. So I hope to take that statement as like a seminal statement and demonstrate to the conversation of the Gita how Krishna exhibits ideal teaching skills. And when we take that framework, Dhutakarma Prabhu once told me that he sees Prabhupada's books as filled with buried jewels. It's an underground treasure of buried jewels. So if we dig deep enough, we find a jewel, and one jewel may be enough to enrich us for our entire life. So he said that he read Prabhupada's book several times and he found that Prabhupada did emphasize scientific outreach a lot. And he took that as his life's mission, and that's what he's been doing. And he achieved significant amount of success by Krishna's mercy, by Prabhupada's mercy. So I see that Prabhupada has talked about the Gita extensively. Prabhupada made the Gita the basis of his outreach. Now, I have not been able to find a written source for this, but several senior Prabhupada disciples have told me that once Prabhupada was asked if he were alone on an island trapped, which book would he want with him? And Prabhupada had said Bhagavad-gita. I would like to find a written source for it, but I haven't yet found it. But it's reasonable because Prabhupada did say that when he was asked which books he would like to comment on again, he did say Bhagavad-gita. He did not say that I would like to comment on Chaitanya Charan again. He did not say I would like to comment on the NOD. He did say that I would like to comment on Bhagavad-gita. So yes, the Bhagavad-gita has a lot of personal elements to it. Of course, there is philosophy, but when we see it in the light of the relationship between the two of them, between Krishna and Arjuna, then we start seeing that actually it's an expression of their love. And it's like, say, two devotees are discussing some philosophy. We might find it interesting. But if we know both the devotees personally, and then we say, okay, this devotee is making this point, and this devotee is making this point. And okay, this is how they think. Now they want to make this point. Okay. So when we know the two of them personally, we know the two of their relationship, then that brings a special flavor to their philosophical discussion. So I feel the Gita is a way to not just understand the teaching of Krishna, it's also the way to understand Krishna as a person. And that is what is shown at the end of the Gita. In 1876 and 77. First, in 76, both Sanjay says, I am thrilled. But first he is saying that Rajan Samsrutya Samvadam Adbhutam Keshava Arjuna Yo Punyam Rishyami Cha Muhurmu. He says, I am remembering the conversation and I am thrilled. But then the next verse he says, Tatya Samsrutya Rupavatya Adbhutam Hare Vismayo Me Mahan Rajan Rishyami Cha Punha Punha. He says, as I contemplate the message, I cannot but contemplate the person. Person is talking about the form. And we could say that he's referring to the Virat Rupa, but he's also referring to the form that revealed the Virat Rupa. So for Sanjay, his thrill moves from the teachings to the teacher, from the Gita to Krishna. And I find that as our relationship with the Gita will evolve, then yes, the teachings are important, but the teacher becomes just as if not more important. And yes, then there is definitely a lot of rasa in the Bhagavad-gita.
And would you say the same is true for Srila Prabhupada's writings, that in the beginning when we're hearing Srila Prabhupada's writings, then we're very much drawing on his teachings, and but later on when we read different purports, conversations, and then why he said this in this circumstance, but this in this circumstance, we're not just hearing the philosophy that Srila Prabhupada is giving, but we're actually learning about Srila Prabhupada's heart, his personality, his qualities, how he thinks.
That is so true. Thank you for bringing this point, bro. I was just in Alachua. I was talking with one senior Prabhupada disciple, and I was talking with him, and maybe I'll invite him for a podcast and he will himself say this, but I wouldn't want to use his name right now. So I asked him, what is the greatest, what could be the greatest strength for Prabhupada's movement and what would be the greatest danger? He said the greatest strength would be understanding Srila Prabhupada. And he says the greatest danger is quoting Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada said. So, we can weaponize Prabhupada's quotes to fulfill our own agendas. Agenda is a negative word, but to reinforce our own conceptions. And that's not wrong if we are not being exclusivist. Okay, this is my understanding. This is their understanding. So what happens is that there is the point and there is the point of the point. So there's a particular point being made and there's a purpose why the point is being made. So initially focus on the 5 points and you find them, yeah, this is nice. This is interesting. This is insightful. This is great. But after some time, when we read Prabhupada's books, we're not just seeing the point, we're seeing the point in the light of the person. And what is Prabhupada's mission? Prabhupada started a society for Krishna consciousness. So we see the point in the light of the purpose of the point. So you could say there's a point, then there's a purpose, and there is seeing the point in the light of the purpose. And I feel when the purpose is best understood when we have read about Srila Prabhupada, when we have heard about Srila Prabhupada as a person, and then we have understood his mission. So yes, the way we may read Prabhupada's teachings, read Prabhupada's books in our first 2-3 years in Krishna consciousness, the first 5 years in Krishna consciousness, and the way we may read in after 10-15 years, it's very different. And I find that every time I read Lilamrut is one of the books I keep reading regularly. In general, Prabhupada's biography, Lilamrut. Every time I read Lilamrut, after that, when I read Prabhupada's books, I am able to see them in a very different light. Same Bhagavad-gita, if the memory of the person Srila Prabhupada is strongly in my mind, then when I read the Bhagavad-gita, it's not Bhagavad-gita as it is, then it is not just philosophy, it is a person speaking to me. And when we know the person, then we can make sure that we understand the point in the light of the purpose of the point.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. It's really about, someone asked me just a few days ago, they said, how do we teach the absolute truth and at the same time be sensitive to the person we're speaking to? And it was quite an interesting question, because it was almost as though they juxtaposed theological accuracy and human sensitivity. And what kind of occurred to me was that when we understand the theology deeply and we have a very pure motivation, then preaching the absolute truth and being humanly sensitive, I think they seamlessly integrate.
Yeah.
And so
Beautifully
sorry,
put.
yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so I just thought because the absolute truth is beautiful, the absolute truth is illuminating, the absolute truth is sensitive. But I think when we understand or misunderstand the absolute truth, or when we have some ulterior motive, then preaching the absolute truth actually becomes the opposite. But when we deeply imbibe it, then that absolute truth will integrate seamlessly with being empowering and illuminating like that.
True. Actually, this is where I see Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priyahitam chet. Krishna talks about discipline of speech, or study of speech, or discipline of speech. He's saying Anudvega karam and satyam. He's not seeing the two as contradictory, he's saying that both of them are integral parts of effective speaking. So, yes, and how does that come about? If we focus on the purpose, then both work together. Just like a doctor's purpose is to heal the patient so that in the future the patient has better health. But the doctor also doesn't want to hurt the patient right now more than necessary. So that's why there is some pain medication, but there is also the cure. So I think that theological accuracy, if somebody says, in terms of making sure that a person gets the clear, conclusive understanding so that the person can develop love for Krishna and attain the highest level of Krishna consciousness. That is so important. But at the same time, where they are, if their present conceptions are different, are in opposite, then we cannot just destroy their present conceptions. I see it like, suppose somebody is living in a ramshackle house which may collapse at any time. Now we may want to give them a better house, but if we just go in with a bulldozer and say, I'm going to destroy your house, you will say, I'll build a better house for you. We have to first earn their trust, otherwise they will oppose us. They'll not accept the house here. And so whatever be the conceptions a person presently has, even if those conceptions are wrong conceptions, they are like the house they are living in right now, conceptual house. And we want to give them a better house to live in. But if we just demolish the house that they are presently living in, then they may, if we have not earned their trust till then, what will happen is, first they will oppose the demolition, and after we demolish, they may just go away from us, and then what we have done is, we have rendered them homeless. We've not given them a better home. We have rendered them homeless. So That's when Nabuddhibhedam Janaya Jnanam Karma Sanginam. 26, Krishna says that don't disturb the minds of people who are, even if they are ignorant or attached. And even if you are wise and detached, but act in such a way that they can be elevated. So yes, focusing on the purpose helps us in being both faithful and sensitive. It's accuracy and sensitivity, as you put it. That's true.
Our time is going, and I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. And maybe I will ask the question from a different perspective just to see what it may draw out. If I was to ask you, what are the three main reasons that devotees for devotees who may not be able to connect deeply with the Gita? Why do you think devotees don't or may not feel connected to the Gita or feel like they're deriving that inspiration or that insight from the Gita? What would you say three observable things that you've seen which may block that connection?
It's seen as too basic, it's seen as too philosophical, and it's seen as too repetitive. So that's why those are three main reasons, and I think all three can be addressed. It's basic, but it's not just basic. There are layers and levels of meaning. It's philosophical, but it's not just philosophical, it's also personal. It's a personal reciprocation with Krishna and Arjuna. And it's repetitive, but actually Prabhupada says repetition is a good thing. So it's repeating, but from different perspectives. So if you start saying, okay, this point, there's a beautiful example for repetition. Ultimately, all music is made of the 7 swaras only. But it's just the way they bring them together. It can produce very different sounds. All English languages have just 26 letters. But how they come together, it's different. So those
just
are my...
on repetition, one devotee once gave a nice metaphor. He said the Gita is a song, and every song has a chorus. And so what you'll find in the Gita is there is a chorus which is repeatedly coming up. And instead of seeing that as a repetition, like any good song, it brings your focus back to what the main purpose of that song is.
That's beautiful. I'm going to write on this now. I'm already thinking of verses which can be consider the Gita's choruses now, or themes, not verses. Thank you for sharing that.
So this is beautiful. The devotees or readers may see the Gita as too basic, too philosophical, or too repetitive. And when we break out of those conceptions, then we avail ourselves of the opportunity to see the deep beauty of the Gita. Wonderful, wonderful. I was thinking, when you look at Western scholars or the first Westerners who are interacting with the Gita, it seems that more than bhakti, the message that they were really focusing on from the Gita was the concept of karma yoga or detached work. That seems to come out in a lot of writings of those outside of the Indian tradition that studied the Gita. That became like a key message for them. The idea of working without attachment to the result and the power of that concept.
That's interesting.
I was just wanting to ask you, maybe you can comment on that. And my follow-up question to you would be, if you were to share 3 concepts from the Gita which you think are powerful for the world, which will immediately give people a sense of the brilliance of the Bhagavad-gita or the relevance of it. If you were to share 3 insights from the Gita or concepts or philosophical illuminations, what would those concepts be?
Okay. Well, as far as Karma Yoga is concerned, this is somewhere I am still somewhat conflicted. See, there are 2 ways you could look at the Gita. The Gita teaches about bhakti, and that's what it teaches. And any reading of the Gita which emphasizes anything else is off. It's wrong. Yes, as far as the conclusion is concerned, Krishna is very categorical. Sarva dharman paritijya mam ekam sharanam vraja. At the same time, Krishna himself said, Manushyanam Sahasreshu, thousands of people, few will endeavor to know me, and among thousands of those who endeavor, few will actually come to know me. So those who are ready to approach Krishna with the motive of pure devotion, full surrender, they are going to be rare. So for those who are not ready for that, can others find something in the Gita? My understanding is yes, surely they can find something valuable in the Gita. The only problem is, if you see, when in the Bhagavad-gita only Krishna says that going to Swarga is a part of Karma Kanda, and that's a valid Vedic teaching. But what Krishna reproaches in 243 and 44 is not that somebody is aspiring to go to Swarga, go to heaven, but na anyad asti iti vadinaha, that there is nothing else in the Vedas except this. That is the problem. So if somebody draws leadership lessons from the Bhagavad-gita, if somebody draws some lessons for self-help from the Bhagavad-gita, if somebody draws lessons about lifestyle management from the Bhagavad-gita, I would say that it's at least bringing the Bhagavad-gita in the horizon of people's consciousness. Otherwise, it's not there at all. So the problem that comes is not that somebody feels inspired to focus on Karma Yoga through the Bhagavad-gita, but that, or somebody emphasizes Karma Yoga as a teaching of the Gita. The problem comes when they say Karma Yoga is the teaching of the Bhagavad-gita, is the teaching or the highest teaching. It's like in our tradition, the difference between Brahmavad and Mayavad. We fully accept that the ultimate reality has an impersonal aspect. And we respect. Prabhupada says Maitreya Muni was an impersonalist. Shamik Rishi was an impersonalist. And we don't criticize them for that. They're respected in the Bhagavatam. But the problem is that when they think the impersonalist aspect of the absolute truth is the highest, and everything else is either subordinate or illusory. Similarly, yes, Karma Yoga may be drawn from the Bhagavad-gita, and it's not bad necessarily, as long as it's not made the conclusive teaching. So,
just to build on your point, it seems as though Karma Yoga also would be a more universal message which would relate to all people, regardless of how, some may not want to get into a personal relationship with God in that way, or it seems like a more universal message that regardless of one's theological standpoint can be a very powerful concept to apply in one's life in order to live a happier and healthier life.
That is very true. If you consider in one sense the whole yoga phenomena that has spread in the West, there are many distortions that have come with the yoga phenomena. But through it all, there are people who have developed appreciation for Eastern spirituality. And those who practice yoga, by yoga I mean physical yoga asanas primarily, those who practice yoga asanas, they are among the people who are the most receptive to even bhakti yoga. All of them are not. So my understanding is something similar. Now, we would not teach yoga without bhakti yoga. But if others are teaching yoga and they are not teaching bhakti yoga, is that a good thing or a bad thing? That is one of the things I find in the Bhagavad-gita, that good and bad are contextual. They are not universal. It is based on where someone is at a particular place. Krishna himself says at one point that to consider that people will label you a coward and therefore don't give up your duty. That's what he says in the second chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. That you'll feel more humiliated than anything. It will be worse than death for you. But that same Krishna later says that be equipoised among in pleasure and pain, in honor and dishonor. Be detached from the opinion of the people of the world. So which is the teaching of the Gita? Well, it depends. If somebody can be inspired to do the right thing by considering that people will reproach me if I don't do the right thing, let's go do the right thing. But if somebody can do the right thing based on intrinsic motivation without needing others' appreciation, that's better. But that doesn't mean if somebody is doing the right thing because of extrinsic motivation, it's bad. So the Gita itself has multi-level teachings. And that's why a 1-0 approach is not really, I would say, in harmony with the teaching of the Gita itself. So, yes, Karma Yoga is what some people might take. Some people focus on the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita and they talk about Dhyan Yoga. That's also not bad. It's as long as they don't just divorce that chapter from the rest of the Gita. If you consider 3 of the teachings of the Gita, which I find most relevant or inspiring today, one of them is about expanding our consciousness. We may have to live with pain, but we don't have to live in pain. That Arjuna, Krishna did not magically remove Arjuna's dilemma. I had to fight against my relatives. But Krishna gave him a higher purpose for life, higher purpose for what he was doing. And there was a pain of fighting against his relatives, but in the light of that higher purpose, that pain became manageable. So the Gita expands our consciousness of life and its purpose. And as it shrinks our problems and pains. We may have to live with pain, but we don't have to live in pain. So that's broadly based on 1858 in the Bhagavad-Gita. And the second, what I find especially encouraging is that this 1716, Krishna talks about satisfaction as austerity of the mind. Manha prasada. So I find that satisfaction is not just an emotion, it's a decision. And each of us has to take that decision to be satisfied. And what the Gita does, it's in the light of the same point which I mentioned earlier. Arjuna could have looked at his situation and be dissatisfied. I had to fight against my relatives, I had to fight against my elders. But Arjuna looked at, Krishna guided Arjuna's vision to see not the bad that he was confronting right now, but the good that he will achieve eventually. And that's how, at the end of the Gita, he is peaceful. He has become calm and composed. So satisfaction is not just an emotion, it's a decision. And again, the Gita can help us to make this decision. And the third point which I find is that God is not, or Krishna is not just a fulfiller of desires. Krishna is the fulfillment of desires. So he is, I see this is the evolution from 716 to 719 in the Gita. 716 is where initially a person is approaching God, Artho Jigyasur Artharthi. God, please remove his problem, please give me some wealth. That is, we see God as the fulfiller of our desires. But in 719, what happens? Bahunam janmanamante jnanaman mam prapadite vasudevah sarvamiti. And Krishna is the fulfillment of our desires. So if we let the Gita guide us, our desires may or may not be fulfilled, but our heart will find fulfillment. Those are 3 quick things that I can think of right now.
Wonderful, beautiful, beautiful. I think that's such a beautiful note to end on. And I think we covered a lot of good ground today. We began by talking about the Gita, your relationship with the Gita. We talked about the 4 stages that you went through in your study of the Gita. And then our first major discussion was really about drawing insight from the Gita and how there is license and encouragement for us to use our intelligence as long as the insights that we draw are supported by the acharyas, by Guru Sadhu Shastra, and those insights illuminate the sadhya and the sadhana of the Gita. Just like our acharyas have many different perspectives on the Gita, but ultimately arrive at the same point. Every reader of the Gita can also worship the Gita by their intelligence and be very thoughtful to understand what's going on here. And then we talked about how the Gita is not just a book of philosophy, it's not just Krishna's words, but when we interact deeper, we can understand so much about Krishna and indeed Arjuna's personality through their words. And in that way, the Gita is also illuminating on the character and the personality of the speakers of the Gita, and this makes it very nourishing to one's heart. We talked about the 3 blocks that may come for someone that prevents them from connecting deeply with the Gita. They see that the Gita is too basic. They see that it's too philosophical. They see that it's too repetitive. But you beautifully unpacked those misconceptions for us. And then you ended by sharing 3 key messages that we can share with the world about the Gita, or that the Gita gives us. That number 1, we live with pain, but we don't have to live in pain. That satisfaction is not just an emotion, but satisfaction is a decision that we can make in our life. And Krishna is not just the fulfiller of desires, but Krishna is the ultimate fulfillment of our desires. And this was a very sweet point, which is perhaps the culmination of the Gita, where we fully connect with Krishna through his divine words. So thank you so much, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu.
You have robbed me of my monopoly of a detailed summary at the end of a podcast.
I tried my best to follow.
It was quite precise. Yeah, covered almost everything. Thank you so much. We should meet again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
We would like to, maybe in the future when we meet, we can reverse this. And I will ask you about your relationship with the Gita. And we can discuss.
Sure.
And you have done so much on the Gita also. We'd love to hear about it. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila
Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.